What shapes youth development? Probably one of the most commonly recognized models, or most well-renowned models in this regard of youth development, is Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems model. Roughly defined, this model is about understanding people's context, people's environments, and how they shape one's growth and development over time. So Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems model is one that looks at where people live, how people live, the context that they live in, and how that shapes you, how that shapes your growth and development. In particular, among youth, among adolescents, kids, infants. And this model grew out of some of Bronfenbrenner's critiques of developmental psychology. Bronfenbrenner saw psychology, specifically developmental psychology, as something that's really strange, as the science of studying strange behaviors in strange situations for the briefest possible period of time. This critique grew out of looking at developmental psychology studies that bring children into a lab setting, and then through various observations in that lab setting, making inferences about their behavior and development. But his critique of this was, how do we know that this translates to life outside of the lab? How do we know if this is really representative of children's experiences in a non-strange setting, in their actual environments, in their neighborhoods, in their families, in their schools? So Bronfenbrenner proposed a model that focused on the context, rather than removing the context, as had occurred in much of developmental psych research at that period of time, but focusing on it and really thinking about how that environment shapes kids and how kids grow up. So in his original theory, Bronfenbrenner proposed a series of nested systems that kids live in. At the center is the child. And around that child, you have the micro, the meso, the exo, the macro, and the chrono systems. Each of these correspond to a set of environments, a set of contexts that children live in, and potentially have a role in shaping their development. So starting at the microsystem, this system is comprised of the different circles and environments that children are immediately a part of. This could be their family, their neighborhoods, their schools. These different places that kids are physically in, that they're physically a part of their family, physically in their neighborhoods, and physically in their schools. As you can imagine, family, friends, neighborhoods, and schools all could potentially have an effect on children's growth and development. Moving up from there, the mesosystem in this model consists of interactions between microsystems. So, how the family interacts with the neighborhood, or the relationship between the family and the school. The mesosystem is about how these relationships between neighborhood and school, or school and family, how these relationships among the microsystem could have an effect on children's development. Beyond that, we have the exosystem. This system is comprised of environments or context that the child is not directly a part of, in contrast to the microsystem. So the exosystem, a common example of this would be the parent's workplace. So even though the parent's workplace is an environment that surrounds the child's context, it's not one that the child is directly a part of, but it can still have an effect on their outcomes or their development. For example, if a parent has to work longer hours or has other work-related stressors they experience in that environment, it can have an effect on children's development through that parent-child relationship, perhaps. Other examples include mass media or politics. Again, environments that surround the child, but the child is not directly a part of. Second to last, we have the macro system. This is Culture. This is the overarching culture or society, the culture of the society that the child is living in. These are the values, the norms, the beliefs that surround or make up the child's cultural environment and shape their development. And lastly, is the chronosystem, marked by that arrow. And the chronosystem is simply how changes over time might affect the child's development. The chronosystem is simply how different changes over time can have an effect on the child's development. So, for example, things like moving to a new home, a new city, or maybe a divorce in the family, or a remarriage among their parents. Life transitions and changes over time comprise the chronosystem. Now, since Bronfenbrenner originally proposed their model, there have been a series of changes. The most recent version of this model is known as the PPCT, or the Person, Process, Context, Time model. You don't need to worry about that. It's beyond this class. Just know that it exists, but at a basic level, understand Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems model and what goes into the different levels. Drawing it to the focus of this class, you know the focus here is about children's development, or at-risk youth, or youth with complex needs. The question that we're asking this week is about resilience. What helps some people thrive despite adversity? Thinking about this question, I'd like you to reflect on Bronfenbrenner's model and think about how various factors in each of those levels we discussed could have an effect on children's growth, and specifically on their risk or resilience.